Let's look at Romans chapter 6 for a real excellent thought. In Romans chapter 6, they give you an illustration off the top of my head, and that's what happens when I do this. If I don't stick with my notes, I do. In Romans chapter, is it Romans 6?
16.
No, but I want Romans 6. I think you know where I'm getting at, Bill. It says, look at verse 3. Know ye yet that so many of us as were baptized into Jesus Christ were baptized into his death. Okay, that word baptized is from the Greek word baptizo. All right. Now, the word in the Greek was immersion. It was, if you translated it correctly, it should have been immersed. Even that has a connotation. Because, so then people look at that verse, and you have to ask yourself, is that water baptism or is that spiritual baptism? Were you baptized in water or were you immersed into the Holy Spirit, through the Holy Spirit? And many people, commentaries, will talk about that is water baptism, so that's the reason when you are saved, you have to be baptized by water. Now look at the next verse. And so what it means, the King James folks were Catholics, and they were translating into English for the king, and it had to be approved. And Catholics baptized and immersed. They baptized. They sprinkled. They didn't do it by water. So in order to get the passage, in order to get the King James passed, they interpreted the word baptize generically, where you could interpret it either way. So you could interpret it water baptism. That didn't mean that that's not immerse. Immerse means taken under. Water baptism, immerse means you're taken under the water. Catholics didn't do that. Lutherans don't do that. Methodists don't do that. No. They immerse. They sprinkle. Yeah. So when you say when they say I've been baptized, they mean that they've been baptized through sprinkling or whatever they do that. But the text says to immerse. Mm-hmm. So by making an interpretation of the Greek word, they chose to use a word generic, which it does mean baptized, but it's a generic term that ought to mean immerse. Right. Now, but in this verse, in my opinion, it's not water baptism, it's spiritual baptism.
Right.
Now, why did I look at verse 4? Therefore, we are buried with him by baptism. Number one is, how can you be sprinkled if you're buried, because you go under?
Well, that's true. And
to number two is, I was not buried in a physical sense with Christ. Correct?
Correct. Right.
I wasn't buried physically, literally, in the grave with Christ. No. Neither am I literally to be baptized into Christ. It is a phrase that says that I am to be immersed in the spiritual sense. So what I'm saying is the interpretation of a word for word, there's sometimes you have to make interpretations of a Greek word to make sense out of it, and it's left up to the person who's doing it to make that interpretation. They haven't changed the Greek, they've just made it more apt. Whereas when you come to the NIV, it is not a word, it is basically it's a word-by-word interpretation, but they've chosen to... I gave you your outline last week. Your outline last week The outline last week gave you, I don't have that outline with me. The outline last week gave you, I know what I did with it. I think it's page, the outline I gave you last week. I had all that here with me somewhere, I thought I did.
What was it, Charles?
The outline last week I gave you, I had all that right.
Daniel, you were.
It was, who has that last week's outline?
What?
Right here?
Last week's outline on, there's a page missing.
Was it
No,
that?
that's Daniel.
What was
Yeah.
the book? What book was the book?
Luke, I'm talking about, I can't believe I don't have it with me right now.
I can't remember what it was.
Let me see.
The outline last week. You got more stuff.
I got it here.
You got last week's outline?
This one there.
Page 20? No, I need page 20, 22.
The 22 is,
No, I need page 23.
23?
You got 23? You got 23.
23 is right here. That's what we gave you.
Are you got 21? Are you got? Which one? There it is, right here. 20, is that page 20?
Yeah, go with that.
Yeah.
On the page 20. Notice on page 20, did you show me 20, Bill? I'm sorry. Did you show me page 20? On page 20,
Yeah.
you'll notice that there is down number 5, choosing a Bible translation, number 5, there is, the second was translation, a word phrase or text in another language that has meaning equivalent to that of the original. Formal equivalent is next, word for word as much as possible. Words, figure of speech, and even the sentence structure is of the original language. And then on the back side, dynamic equivalent emphasizes on reproducing the functional meaning of the ancient words with freedom to rearrange the order of the word, syntax, in the target language. In other words, what the King James tried to do was not to change the syntax. Don't change the verb to a noun. Make sure the adverb is correct. They did not change the way the sentence structure was made. Even if it doesn't make sense in English. The dynamic equivalent, for instance, like the NIV, it went thought for thought. In other words, they took the thought of the text and they gave as clear understanding of that text as they could. So that then they're called paraphrase. The word paraphrase emphasis is on the expression, expressing the meaning in contemporary language with numerous additional words. It's not a translation. It is taking the sentence and making it say what it should in our language. In other words, we wouldn't say to your children, I don't want you to go sit in the seat of the scornful today. Now, some of you King James people might do that, but what would you say? I don't want you to go down to the bar and sit with the prostitutes.